My name is David Harris. I'm the Managing Director at the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice here at Harvard Law School. On behalf of Dean Minow and Harvard University, I welcome you to this event tonight. We're really pleased to be able to do this and especially pleased about the turnout. We think that the issues we'll talk about today are some of the most important issues that confront our Commonwealth, and it's really important for us to know and understand where our candidates stand on these issues. I think we'll hear a great deal that will be helpful to us, and we encourage you to use the cards that you had on your seat if you have questions that you'd like us to put to the candidates. Here's our final candidate, and we will get those to our moderators. I want to remind you or inform you about a couple of other events that the Institute has coming up that might be of interest to you. On March 25th, we will have an exhibit of photographs by Richard Ross of juveniles, incarcerated juveniles, and that will be part of an exhibit that will be on the third floor of this building from March 21st to April 11th. We'll be screening a film on April 3rd called The Waiting Room, which is an award-winning film about a waiting room in Oakland, California. It's a fabulous film. I encourage you to come. And on April 17th, we'll be showing a film called Free Angela about Angela Davis, and that too promises to be a special event. And in April, we will be having a candidates forum for the candidates for Attorney General, which has not yet been scheduled, but we look forward to seeing you here for that. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the format of what we're going to do tonight before I introduce the other co-sponsors. We are going to allow the candidates, each candidate, to give us a short opening statement. And then Professors Ogletree and Gertner will pose questions to the candidates, and they will be given a certain amount of time to answer them and have a brief exchange between themselves. And then, as I said, if you submit questions on those cards to us, we'd like to collect those around 7:15. We will try to get those to the moderators. So at this point, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce my companion in arms and struggle, who really is responsible for this. I mean, I think I'm standing up here welcoming you because we're at the law school, but Jean has done just an incredible amount of work and put an incredible amount of thought and energy into being here today. And we at the law school are especially happy to be able to partner with Middlesex Community College. It means a great deal to us to be able to have this partnership, to have students from the college here. And so I want to introduce Jean Traunstein from Middlesex Community College to welcome you again. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And David Harris is also someone I feel I do a forum of, well, I won't say a forum a month, but maybe a forum every 6 months in a heartbeat. I am very happy to be here from Middlesex, to welcome my students from Middlesex Community College, and to say on behalf of our president, Dr. Carol Cowan, that we are exceedingly pleased to make criminal justice one of the issues of this campaign. And that is one of the reasons why we're having this forum, because so many of us believe we need to have deep, meaningful conversations about this issue. Not sound bites, not things that people just say over the top, but real conversation. So my students who often don't think that this is possible, I want them to get a chance to see that it is possible and that anything for them is possible, and you can come to Harvard anytime and see lots of wonderful things happening, and I welcome you, everyone else welcomes you, and I hope we have a really wonderful evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Now I'd like to introduce the co-chairs of Harvard BALSA's Black Law Student Association Political Action Committee, Ron McKenzie and Whitney Benz, our other co-sponsors.
Hello, I'm Ron McKenzie, co-chair of the Harvard Black Law Student Association, and I'm here today with my fellow co-chair, Whitney Benz, and we welcome you to today's forum. The Political Action Committee works to effect social change through political actions on issues of importance to communities of color. We are excited to partner with the Houston Institute to facilitate a discussion about criminal justice issues with candidates for governor in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a position wielding power to effect great change in the Commonwealth's criminal justice system. We would like to remind attendees today that the Political Action Committee is a nonpartisan organization, and we in no way endorse any of the views that may be expressed today at tonight's forum.
However, there's one item that I wanted to bring your attention to today. This year, we've been working with Jobs Not Jails, a community coalition. Well, it sounds like y'all are have heard of them. So it's Jobs Not Jails, for those of you who aren't aware, is a community coalition working to end mass incarceration in the Commonwealth through supporting enactment of reforms to the criminal justice system. These reforms would redirect funds currently earmarked for prison construction towards targeted job creation programs and human capital development. We would invite all those in the audience, as well as the candidates present here, to sign the petition after this forum if they feel so inclined. Thank you for being here. Have a good time.
Now for the main event. I'm really pleased and fortunate to be able to introduce two of the law school superstars who will, in fact, moderate today. And I think they don't need a great deal of introduction. Professor Charles Ogletree, the executive director of the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute, and Professor Nancy Gertner, former federal judge and cognoscente, who will moderate the discussion, and I will turn it over to them. Thank you.
Yay.
Thanks so much, David. Thanks everyone for coming. This is one of the many events that we sponsor, and as you've heard, and you should know, all of our events are free and open to the entire public, and we hope that you will enjoy it and engage it. I would just want to say we're going to ask you written questions if you have questions, and I will try, Nancy will try throughout the program to say, write your questions now, don't wait until the last minute. And those in this section to my left, pass them to your right, and David will pick them up as they come along, and he'll pick up both sections of cards. And those who are to my right and on the left-hand side to you, if you'll pass your cards out, someone else will pick them up as well. Jean will pick them up. That will be fantastic. And they will, in a sense, also go through the questions, not to prevent what you have to say from being said, but if someone says the same thing 3 times, they'll give us 1 question rather than all 3. The format for tonight, and we have just a little bit of time, is that we're first going to introduce the panelists who are here. Mr. Berg, who could not be here, has sent a written presentation, video, and Ernest is going to come up and play that to start it, and then we'll introduce the other individuals who are here as well.
The opportunity to share my thoughts. I'm sorry I can't join you in person this evening. Criminal justice. I'm very grateful to the sponsors from the law school correction system for giving me the opportunity to share my campaign this way. I have spoken out about them.
Hold up.
Continue to speak out about them. My campaign, my beliefs, and should I be governor, my administration are rooted in values that I think underlie the kind of Commonwealth we want to be. Values that include, for example, social justice, a commitment to equal treatment, and a commitment to compassion.
I got it.
You got it?
Yep. All right, so let me try this again. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Don Berwick, and I'm a candidate for governor. I'm sorry I can't join you in person this evening, and I'm very, very grateful to the sponsors from the law school for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you this way. Criminal justice and the correction system are central to my interests in this campaign, and I have spoken out about them and will continue to speak out about them throughout the campaign. My campaign, my beliefs, and should I be governor, my administration, are rooted in values that I think underlie the kind of Commonwealth we want to be. Values that include, for example, social justice, a commitment to equal treatment, and a commitment to compassion as foundational to the way we work together and with each other. I cannot think of a test of these moral values that's more serious or more important to us than the way we manage our attitudes and approaches to criminal justice and people in trouble. This is not just about how we treat people at the fringes of society. This is about us, about the kind of place we want to be, who we are, who we wish to be, the Commonwealth we want to build. Right now, by that moral test, Massachusetts is failing. We have 12,000 people in our county houses of corrections. We have 12,000 people in our state prisons. The recidivism rate, depending on how you count it, is 50% or 60% or 70%. By some measures, our correction system performs worse than Alabama's, worse than Texas. And in response to this, we risk having exactly the wrong answer, which is building more prisons, just at the time when we should be developing alternatives to prisons and reducing our prison population through correct treatment programs. We need to commit to a correction system in Massachusetts that provides correction and a criminal justice system that provides justice. And together, that they both represent the vision of the Commonwealth and the community we want to have and we want to build. We need to remember that the primary antidote to crime is not punishment. We have a three-part challenge: the challenge of prevention, the challenge of rehabilitation, and the challenge of reentry. Prevention is key. The best approach to crime is to prevent crime in the first place. Now, crime and corrections and mental illness and substance abuse are intertwined inextricably. We have to commit to sound care in this Commonwealth at the world-class level for mental illness and substance abuse. 50% of the people in our prisons have substance abuse problems or mental illness or behavior disorders. We can commit to being the best correction system in the nation, but we'll have to focus on mental illness and substance abuse as the key. Early in my campaign, months ago, I committed to a bold goal for this Commonwealth, and that is a 50% reduction in substance abuse and in suicide in the Commonwealth over the next decade. We can do that. There are best practices we can learn from, we can copy, and we can build upon, and even better, build better models here in the Commonwealth, and we will do so. We need rationality in our non-prison options. We need to give judges and courts latitude to craft approaches and help to people who are sliding down that slope into a life of crime. 3 strikes laws, mandatory sentencing, criminalizing minor offenses, these work against us, against the possibility of helping people. We need more latitude in the justice system in the hands of judges and courts. Our excessive use of pre-trial detention is keeping people away from jobs, from their families, and from community and social supports that could help them avoid the slide into crime. And just for the record, the death penalty has no role at all in American jurisprudence. I am against it. Second, when people are in houses of incarceration, we have a chance. We have a chance to get them off the pathway into deeper crime. We should take that chance. Rehabilitation needs to start on day one. Prisons need sound programs of mental health care and substance abuse treatment and job training and education and planning for release from day one. We know from evidence that sound programs of such support reduce recidivism 50%. Why would we not do that? And instead, we have in the past decade or two cut the heart out of many of these programs in our state prisons and our correctional facilities, and taken the resources away from the professionals in those places who know what to do but no longer have the resources.
He lost his audience.
We got to stop that.
He should have known.
Third is the reentry problem. It is high time that Massachusetts commits to reform its correction system, and I think to achieving the best corrections and criminal justice system in the nation. I think we should aim no lower than that. As governor, I will pursue strongly a course toward restorative justice and compassionate treatment as the hallmarks of a correction system that works for us and for our communities. I'm Don Berwick. Thank you very much.
So we will introduce the remaining people who are on the panel. Thank Don Berwick for his comments. And I will start and followed by Judge Nancy Gertner. And we'll ask questions from my immediate right all the way across, and then we'll switch up. The next question will be the other way. And then we'll, after going through this for a while, go through questions that you have written. So I will say over and over again, write your questions. There's a question going the wrong way. The people on the right side, put them on the, make sure they go all the way to your left, right? People on this left side, make sure they go all the way to your right. That was a good test though, right? So let me start with Elvin Falchuk, and people can raise their hands so they'll know who they are. And everyone's, the full bio is in the program if you want to take a look at it. Elvin Falchuk is with the United Independent Party, and he's a candidate for governor. He's a Massachusetts native and global business executive, and he served from 1999 to 2013 on the executive team of Best Doctors Incorporated, a Boston-based global healthcare company based in Boston. And prior to that, he practiced SEC enforcement law in Washington, D.C., and served on the board of directors of the National Coalition of Healthcare. And he also served as a corporate fellow with the National Governors Association and played active advisory roles with the National Business Group on Health, the Associated Industries of Massachusetts Healthcare Committee, and the American Benefits Council. The United Independent Party candidate for governor of Massachusetts. This was founded in January 2013 by Mr. Falchuk, and supporters, and has supporters throughout the state. Again, Evan Falchuk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mark Fisher is a Republican candidate for governor. He's the owner of Merchants Fabrication. Did you raise your hand? I did. This is the teacher. A metal manufacturing facility in Auburn, but he grew up in Westfield. And he says, quote, he learned the value of earning a buck from his job as a union member at the Old Colony Envelope Company. He financed his higher education with his salary from Old Colony, and later while working at Raytheon, attended evening graduate classes, earning, in addition to an engineering degree, an MS in manufacturing and an MBA. Like many other Americans, Mark was unemployed several times in the past 20 years. His final layoff of 5 was in 2008, and on the same day he received his notice, he found a manufacturing business for sale and purchased the business that he now owned, which he has built and saved to educate his children and improve the workers' lot.
Steve Grossman, who I'm about to introduce now, is a Democratic candidate for governor. He's a small businessman with 35 years of experience running a fourth-generation family company and union shop. As CEO of Grossman Marketing Group, he was the first business owner in Massachusetts to testify in favor of earned sick time in 2006. As chairman of the Massachusetts Democratic Party and as National Party chair under President Bill Clinton, Grossman launched initiatives that propelled women, youth, and people of color into leadership positions. And he also was elected state treasurer in 2010, where he worked with community banks and created the Small Business Banking Partnership, a program which generated more than $1 billion in loans to small businesses, with an emphasis on businesses owned by women, minorities, immigrants, and veterans. Steve Grossman.
Juliette Kayyem, raise your hand, as if you have to. Right. Has served as an appointee in both the Governor Deval Patrick and President Barack Obama's administrations, but she began her career as a civil rights attorney, advocating for the rights of children and defending progressive causes. She advocated through federal authority to have one of the first anti-bullying cases resolved, and argued for the Virginia Military Institute and the Citadel to open its doors to women. As Governor Patrick's Homeland Security Advisor, she oversaw the 8,000-plus member of the Massachusetts National Guard, the state's strategic security planning, and the distribution of Homeland Security funds. She's taught new leaders in public safety and the military at the Harvard Kennedy School, has served as a CNN analyst, which is where many of us saw her. In 2013, she was a Pulitzer Prize finalist for her series urging the Pentagon to end its female combat exclusion rule, a prohibition that the military has since lifted in recognition of women's contribution to the war effort.
Dr. Scott Lively, to my far right. Dr. Scott Lively is an attorney, a pastor, and president of Defend the Family International. He graduated magna cum laude from Trinity Law School in 1999 with special emphasis in international human rights, and earned a doctorate of theology degree from the School of Bible Theology of the Pentecostal Assemblies of God in 2007. And until 2007, he served as the managing partner in Lively, Ackerman, and Cowles in Temecula, California, which concurrently headed the Pro Family Law Center, a public interest firm which he founded. Dr. Scott Lively.
All right, I'm going to begin with the first question for you, beginning with Juliette and then all the
Okay.
way down. We're at an extraordinary moment in criminal justice.
Don't we get openings or no?
Oh, I'm sorry, you do get openings.
Okay.
I was about to open.
That's
before.
okay.
You get openings. Open. Damn.
Okay.
Given an opportunity, I'll just walk right in.
2 minutes. Go, Juliette.
Oh, me first. Okay, I want to first thank everyone for being here. This is a serious issue about the future of Massachusetts and the students in particular who organized such an important event to have a serious discussion. And thank you for opening up this podium to those of us who want to discuss it. And so I appreciate all of you, given I think a lot of the build up to this event. So thank you. Okay, now let's get to substance, because that's what matters here. I don't think we need to go into the morality of how important it is for criminal justice reform. Let's just talk about policy, because that's what you want from a governor. And rarely, the beauty of criminal justice reform, really, is rarely do you get good policy, good morals, and lower cost all combined, right? I mean, that's so rare when you actually think about some of the public policy challenges of our time. We can do it in Massachusetts because we have the benefit of following other states that have already done it. So my proposal, I came out on the campaign in August, and came up with a comprehensive criminal justice plan by November. I am the first candidate to actually have substantive plans regarding an issue that is not only important for all of you, but is also the issue that is going to eat our budget alive. As a governor, I inherit a budget that anticipates about $1 billion in prison construction by 2020. So if you want to be depressed, that is your number, right? Despite even given the human harm. So how should we go about this? Because obviously there are statutory changes that would have to be made and fought with Beacon Hill, which I'm for. But one is essentially, as a governor, what can I do? I can reduce recidivism by making corrections about corrections. I own the corrections department. I used to be a member of the Executive Office of Public Safety as a governor. It's about family unification and it's about workforce development. Those are the two issues that keep men and women back from the criminal justice system. If we can cut that number in half, all the other issues, they don't go away, but then you stop feeding the beast over and over again. So on day one, I have a clear sense of what, as governor, I can do, and then pushing through the legislative process, issues like sentencing reform, 3 strikes, and other issues that are clearly not necessary now, and we need strong leadership. We need an attorney general who wants to go this way, and so you'll hear from the attorney generals to push this state forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank all the co-sponsors for this forum and those in attendance tonight. I'm going to do my utmost best to make sure that my audio and my video are more in sync than Don Berwick's. And I give permission to Juliette and to Evan to give me a head slap if that's not the case, but please be kind, okay? We have a new courthouse in Worcester, and its decor reminds me of this building right here, but I'm very partial to the old one. And I'm partial to the old one because there's an inscription outside the building, engraved in the stone, high above the street level, and it says, "Obedience to law is liberty." Obedience to law is liberty. And as I look out these glass windows against the far back wall, I can read, "Obey the law to the end that we may be free, and it's attributed to Cicero. When I first heard of these things, it seems kind of like an oxymoron, but it's so true. My children have had a hard time understanding it with the rules that my wife and I laid down. We've had a hard time in the States understanding it. And internationally, we see what's playing out in Russia, in Ukraine. We have a hard time understanding that. If we don't obey the law and find liberty there, and we try to impose our will upon others, it's tyranny. Outside the law, it's tyranny. The one guiding rule, I should say, that lets us know when we can do such a thing is Martin Luther King Jr. in his letter from a Birmingham jail. We believe that we're a country under God. And when there is a rule or an injustice that doesn't accord with that, then we have a duty not to obey it. He lived that, and he changed America through it. Obedience to the law is liberty. I think that should guide all of our principles here today. My focus as governor is in accord with Jobs Not Jails Coalition. I have a 4-point program that I want to get into detail with throughout the forum and through your questions. And that's the big thing. Let's put people back to work before they get into jail, to keep them out of jail. And when they return outside of jail, let's give them jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Evan Falchuk.
Thank you. I'm Evan Falchuk. I'm the United Independent Party candidate for governor. My wife, Felicia, and I have 3 kids. Our oldest daughter, Brenna, is 13, and she doesn't face the kinds of challenges that far too many people in our state face. There are people her age in our Commonwealth who, for no reason other than the color of their skin, are being given leaflets to help them understand what to do when they're stopped by the police. And so it's appropriate, as we're here tonight talking about criminal justice, to talk about policy and to talk about parole and probation and bail and sentencing. But we cannot lose sight of the larger issues. And to me, the larger issue is the opportunity we have to change the mindset, the frame of mind that voters have, that the public has around criminal justice, and to change it from being about crime and punishment and being about looking at it from almost a public health perspective, to get at the root causes, the complicated social and economic and educational problems that cause so much of the crime that is happening in our Commonwealth. The important job of the governor and the next governor is to capture the imagination of the public on this opportunity to bring about reform. The governor's job will be to build consensus around the practical steps that need to be taken and to confront the public with the reality of the fact that more than 90% of people who are incarcerated are going back into the community. To confront them with the reality that we have an obligation to build smart and sensible approaches to reducing recidivism and to easing reentry into our communities. That we have an obligation to reform our broken parole and probation and bail and sentencing systems. The way we'll do this isn't by politicizing these issues. It's by following data-driven and evidence-based solutions. And it's not by asking, what can we do given our limitations, but instead being brave enough to say, what are we capable of? So, yes, this is the biggest challenge that we face, no question about it, but it is the biggest opportunity we have to change the way that people think about criminal justice into a way that is more modern and that works. And I look forward to talking about this in detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Grossman.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here tonight. I'm running for Governor of Massachusetts for a very simple reason. I believe the people of this Commonwealth want proven leadership that will leave no one behind. Proven leadership that will leave no one behind. When I was chairman of the Democratic National Committee, I was sitting with Bill Clinton one day in Philadelphia. It was 1997. I said, Mr. President, what are you trying to accomplish as President of the United States? He said, Steve, as President of the United States, I'm in the solutions business. I never forgot that because that's how I've spent my life. 35 years running a progressive family business in Somerville, many years as a grassroots activist, organizer, as chairman of the state and national Democratic parties, in my charitable and philanthropic work, and now as your state treasurer, I've tried to solve problems. These are serious problems, we have serious challenges, and there are serious, bold, innovative, imaginative solutions to improve the quality of criminal justice. 4 fundamental principles. Number 1, the most important responsibility of governor is to protect public safety. Without protecting public safety, nothing else is possible. If we protect public safety, everything is possible. Number 2, more prisons, mandatory minimums, and undercutting judicial discretion are the wrong approach. They've been proven to be the wrong approach. We need to fix them. Today would be the first day to fix them. If we could fix them today, it wouldn't be soon enough. Third, we need to reform our criminal justice system. That's what this conversation is all about. And finally, mental health issues, behavioral health issues, substance abuse issues are health issues in many cases. They need to be dealt with through our health system, not through our criminal justice system. We need to recognize that we have cut our funding for mental health services in Massachusetts more than any other New England state since 2009. And behavioral health and addictive services, addictive problems are not far behind. So let's understand that we judge a society by how it spends its resources. If we spend our resources wisely, we can deal with this public health epidemic that we have, we can leave no one behind, and we can truly live up to those values which are on the front of the Supreme Court of the United States: equal justice under law.
Thank you. Mr. Scott Lively.
Well, good evening, everyone. I think I'm the only candidate here in the panel that's actually seen the criminal justice system from the inside. I was an alcoholic from the age of 12. I got involved in drugs and in criminal behavior. And I know what it's like to be on the other side of the question. In 1986, I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. I became a Christian, and my life was transformed. And I went from being on that side of the fence to being on the other side of the fence. And today, my wife and I run an inner-city mission in Springfield. We have a church that only seats about 45 people, but we have about 300 people that come through our doors every week. 90% of those people are the most disadvantaged in society. About half of them are in part of one of a number of after-incarceration programs, drug and alcohol treatment of some kind, mental health programs of some kind, and those are the people that we serve. I recognize the problem from the other side of the fence, from the people that actually need the services, and I have a perspective that I think is important to bring into this mix. There's another aspect of this that's being left out of the equation, and that's the problem that it's a question we need to ask. Why do we have so many more prisons today than we had when our grandparents had? It's because there's a problem and a change in the morality of our culture. We used to have a Judeo-Christian value system that believed in self-restraint, personal responsibility, and that the average citizen restrained themselves. They didn't have to be restrained by the police. But over the past couple of generations, that's turned around, and people have a sense of entitlement to do anything that they want to do. And that's why the prisons are full of people. They're not full of innocent people. They're full of criminals. But they're full of criminals who can be rehabilitated, and that's what we should be focusing on. We shouldn't be looking for ways to empty the jails onto the streets without raising the moral standards of the people that we're incarcerating. And I think the only way that can happen is by going back to the value system we had before.
Thank you. Judge Gertner?
Let me begin where I was beginning before. This is an extraordinary moment in criminal justice reform. No one would have ever anticipated that the Attorney General would have been talking about reducing mandatory minimums, eliminating mandatory minimums, that a state like Texas would have closed 3 state prisons and had 2/3 of its parolees employed. So the question, I'll start with you, Juliette. We currently house 23,000 men and women in jails and state prisons, which is an increase of 33% for state prisoners, 65% for county prisoners since 1990. Is that too many? What do you propose to do to reduce our state prison population to catch up with Texas, for God's sake, without risking public safety?
And thank you for that question. The Texas thing always gets people from Massachusetts all worked up. And Mississippi and Arkansas. So I come from a world of Homeland Security in terms of investments and a commitment to public safety and your safety and security. So the fact that someone like me feels very confident talking about criminal justice reform suggests how far we come, because this is really about risk reduction for all of us. And we're increasing the risk by our present criminal justice system. It is making us less safe. So it is, a raw number in abstract. Is it too many? It certainly sounds like too many. And overall, nationally, we certainly know that we incarcerate more people per capita than any other country in the world, I think is the present statistic. And so a couple of procedures that I would implement, as I said, some of these have to be done legislatively. So we can't, all of you are in public policy. We got to be pretty strategic about this. So what can I do on day one as governor, and what can I do by trying to push the legislature because of some of the legislation, the mandatory minimums and 3 strikes? I can certainly decrease overly lengthy incarceration for nonviolent technical violations, right? So you just get more people out of jail for silly stuff. It's just as simple as that. I mean, and second is I can begin to focus on corrections as being about corrections, right? It is about keeping people at the table. Because once you don't throw people away, right? Because we know that it can work for people, both job training and family reunification, finally. The most important thing is to get fewer people into the system. And so I propose, certainly because I know it works, both the increase of drug treatment courts, but the expansion, which we ought to do, of veterans courts. One of the highest populations going into our criminal justice system are veterans. I used to oversee the National Guard. We owe them a lot more than that. We know why they are falling into a criminal justice system. The Pentagon will help pay for it. That's always a good thing from a governor's perspective. And that what you do is that you simply take a pool of people more deserving, it's honestly true, more deserving than maybe other pools for what they've done for our nation, and just get them out of the system, and then deal with the mental health, substance abuse, PTSD, and other issues. If we can take that population out, I can do that on day one as well. So both the long-term plan with the legislature and then the day one plan.
Thank you. Also, I'll remind you again to turn your cards in if you have questions. Make sure you pass them to the aisle, and Jean and others are picking them up. Their hands are up. David's coming down to pick them up. So make sure you turn your cards in, and we'll have the next question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Everyone for everyone.
They've got the rules. We haven't
Right.
got the rules.
Great, thanks for the opportunity. As I said in my opening remarks, it's jobs. It's jobs, not jails. So, as Juliette said, we want to reduce the number of people that are into the prison system. How do we do that? With jobs. I have a 4-point program to do just that. Since Deval Patrick took office, and before, we haven't had a new net job in Massachusetts. We're driving businesses and jobs and people out of Massachusetts. How do we change that? Massachusetts is in competition with other states for companies to come here. So, first step, we have to take the corporate tax rate and make it comparable to those other states where these companies are leaving. 4 of my previous employers, actually 4 in a row, closed their doors and moved out of state. First, we level the corporate tax rate. Second, we end the overburdensome rules and regulations. One quick example, I know an owner of a machine shop in Worcester County. He was fined just recently $7,000 because this laminated sign that he had in his shop that said hazardous material should have said hazardous waste. And rather than give them the 30 seconds to change that, Massachusetts slapped them with a $7,000 fine. And we have horror stories after horror stories like this. That's step 2. Step 3, we do not use taxpayer dollars to fund fad industries. 58 million of your dollars were used to fund Evergreen Solar. 2 years after it was funded, it's closed its doors, it's moved to China, and 800 people lost their jobs. Let's put a level playing field in Massachusetts, not just for the fad industries, and let's stop using taxpayer dollars to do so.
Relate this to criminal justice?
More jobs. They don't, as Juliette said, let's get them out of the prison system. If they're working, less crime. Jobs, not jails. The Jobs, Not Jails Coalition that we've all been invited to attend in April on Boston Common. And number 4, Massachusetts is one of a few states that has an inventory tax. It generates about $200 million a year. It's half of the $400 million in abuse and fraud in the EBT card system. If we fix the abuse and fraud, we more than double the loss of revenue from income tax. We get rid of the income tax, inventory tax. What does that do? You've heard the old adage in real estate, location, location, location. Look where Massachusetts is located, in the middle of New England. We have 3 New England states to our north, 2 to the south. New York is to our left. If we eliminate the inventory tax, Massachusetts becomes a haven for distribution centers, material handling jobs, logistic jobs, administrative jobs, and truck driver jobs here in Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just getting back to your question, Judge, it is too many. And, it started largely in the early 90s when Republicans like Governor Weld, with Charlie Baker, who's not here, trying to be tough on crime. And a lot of these mandatory minimum laws came into effect then, and we started to see these increasingly high rates of incarceration. Now, it's continued under a Democratic governor and a Democratic administration, and the 3 strikes law we're talking about was signed by a Democratic governor. I think the answers of what we need to do are actually really well researched and understood and been published and talked about, and you're right, if in Texas they're doing it, I think we can too. The question is, why aren't we doing it in Massachusetts? And I think it's a combination of, I think we've got a legislature that's not convinced on these issues, and a public that's not convinced on these issues. There was a study that was out that Mass Inc. did, some very interesting polling that was very promising around public perceptions around criminal justice and the need to refocus away from retribution and more towards rehabilitation and how to do job training and all the important things that we can do to help people reintegrate into communities. But in that same poll, there were 45% of respondents who said that they thought taking away televisions and weight rooms were an effective way to rehabilitate prisoners. So that's reality. And so that's one of the reasons why I think one of the most important things that our governor must do, and that's why I talk about it in these terms, is to help the public see this problem differently than they're used to. It's not an either-or thing. We are capable of doing the things that are being done in other states to actually address the underlying causes of these problems. My question is, do we want to keep trying the same old thing? Democrats, Republicans trying the same policies over and over again, saying they're going to do it different this time? Or do we as voters decide that we can do it better and different? That's my vision and view on the way that we can move forward on these extremely important issues.
So yes, it's too many. Yes, it's too many, 24,000 people incarcerated. And so the question is, what can a governor do about it? Well, the first thing a governor can do about it, and it will be in my inaugural address if I'm lucky enough to be the next governor, well, I will announce that I will use every tool I have at my disposal, whether it's an executive order, through legislation, to suspend and stop building new prisons and new prison beds. Suspend them. So what's the alternative? Juliette's right. It'll free up $1 billion between now and 2020. That's the capital budget of the Commonwealth. Not the annual budget, but the capital budget. So what do? I don't know if any of you know this, but there is not a single detox bed in Hampshire County. Amherst, Northampton, other communities. Not a single detox bed. Not a single detox bed in Franklin County, Greenfield, other communities. We need to invest in detox beds. We need to invest in step-down units. We need to invest in recovery centers. These are things that we can do with that money that we free up from a capital budget so that those people who are involved with issues related to mental health, behavioral health, and substance abuse can get the treatment they need. Number 3, we have a system of mandatory minimums. We need to change that. That needs to be repealed. It needs to be taken back. I want to put in the hands of judges. I think we've got a pretty distinguished way in which judges are chosen. It's been done for years, and let's give judges more judicial discretion. And finally, let's look at best practices. There are 2 sheriffs. You mentioned 12,000 people in the county jails. Somebody did. Look at what Mike Ash is doing as the sheriff of Hampden County. Look at what Steve Tompkins is doing as the sheriff of Suffolk County. Workforce training that is actually training people behind the walls so that when they come out, they are ready to go to work, hopefully with some treatment. They can go back to work. The job matters, and that kind of training matters. And finally, other best practices. The state has just contracted with an organization called ROCA in Chelsea, Molly Baldwin, and they have contracted on something called Pay for Success, whereby if over the next 6 years Molly Baldwin can continue to reduce recidivism, and she has been able to do that by almost 50% over the past 10 years, if we can reduce recidivism among 17 to 24-year-olds, we will save the state $142 million. Pay that nonprofit a bonus, give them some incentive, pay for success, and if that works, all of those young people who would have gone back into jail are going to be given the treatment they need, the support services they need, so that they reject guns and gangs and violence and drugs and incarceration in favor of a better life for themselves and for their families.
Thank you. Scott Lively.
Well, no one answered the question that was put initially on why is Texas doing better than Massachusetts? Texas is doing better than Massachusetts because it has a different ideological framework that it's operating from. Texas has a Judeo-Christian model that it's following. It's not a perfect state. It has lots of problems. But on the scale of those who believe that we're accountable to God and those who believe that there is no God to be accountable to, they're on one side of that spectrum, and the people in Massachusetts, many people in Massachusetts, are on the other side of that spectrum. And so when you're asking the question, why is Texas doing better? Why is nobody investigating that question? And I suggest that what people are doing in Texas is they're getting back to the values that our grandparents and our great-grandparents had. Once again, I'll ask the question, why do we have so many jails today when our grandparents didn't? Why do we have so many jails today when our grandparents didn't? It's about the values of the society. You think that it's more racist today than it was back in the 1940s and 50s? I don't believe so. I don't believe so. Anyway, that's my perspective, and I just one last thing, that in our grandparents' day, people would not have done this to show their disapproval. They would have respected a person who holds a different perspective than them, right? Today, this is the norm. Look, these people that are standing up, turning their backs to me, are showing disrespect. They don't care what my opinion is. They're being obnoxious. That's a standard that is different today than used to be in our grandparents' time, and we're diminished for it.
All right, let me ask the next question. The panel is all white, mainly male, one female. Thank you.
Thank you.
What is your plan when you think about Massachusetts as a state that covers all this territory? What about people who are black and brown and poor and looking for jobs, and kids going to school and getting quality education? What's your plan for the communities of color of Massachusetts, starting with Scott and coming around the other way?
Well, my congregation is 3/4 black, probably about 1/4 Hispanic. Maybe 20% Hispanics, about 5% white. And I am working with people of color every single day who are dealing with the problems that are on the other end, the other side of this issue of incarceration. And I believe in social justice, but I believe in social justice from a Christian foundation, not a Marxist one, because that's where the real answers are. The people, our church, the way we describe it as a welcoming and transforming congregation. Anybody can come through our doors and is welcome to join us in the process of rising above our human nature to be better people. And that's what we used to hold as a value system in Massachusetts and across America. But that's what's missing today. Now, that's the same prescription for everyone. It's colorblind. That when we act that way, when we show love and care and compassion for people because they're fellow human beings, not because they're particular skin color, then we rise above that human nature. And that's my prescription, and I think that will work.
Steve Grossman?
So the overarching challenge I think we face is jobs and economic security for everybody. We need to find a way to leave no one behind. When I was running for treasurer, I had the opportunity, I'm a small business man all my life, so I sat with small business owners in Orchard Park one night for 2.5 hours, and then a couple of weeks later I sat with some small business owners, Latino business owners, up at Morangi Restaurant on Blue Hill Avenue. And I listened. And I asked, what are the roadblocks and barriers you face, and how can we in government help remove or lower those roadblocks? And over again, it was access to capital. These were small business owners struggling, and they couldn't get access to capital. So we created something called a Small Business Banking Partnership, which was mentioned earlier. And the focus is putting money in the hands of small business owners with a particular focus on women-owned businesses, businesses owned by minorities, immigrants, and veterans. We put almost over $1 billion in the hands of those businesses, and it's creating jobs all over the state. So economic opportunity is absolutely critical. Second piece of this is poverty. Let's recognize it for what it is. In the neighborhoods of Boston, in our gateway communities, we have poverty, economic and educational deprivation. We've got to take a look at our foundation budgets, and we've got to put additional resources in public education in a way that's going to serve the needs of all of our fellow citizens, so they have the educational tools and resources they need. Unemployment issues, critical. We're going to raise the minimum wage. It's on the ballot. We got to raise the minimum wage. I applaud the Senate for raising it to $11 an hour and indexing it to inflation. That's not going to do it in and of itself. We've got to find ways to invest in housing, low-income housing and middle-income housing. We've got to expand our Section 8 housing program so that more people will be able to afford a roof over their head. We've got to use all of the tools and techniques we have, including doubling our historic tax credit programs, to create more opportunity for those who have low and moderate income to put a roof over their head, to be able to find jobs, to be trained for those jobs in our vocational technical schools and our community colleges, because 85% of those who are educated in our public schools and our public higher education institutions are the backbone of our workforce across the board in every community in the Commonwealth.
Falchuk?
Thank you. I'm somewhat unique among the candidates for governor in that I speak Spanish, and I've spent a fair amount of time up in Lawrence, in one of the gateway communities that struggles, working with one of the community development corporations called Interrise that works with small businesses and medium-sized businesses in distressed areas and helping those business owners with technical assistance, with mentorship, with help with access to different programs, customers, help, and it makes a real difference. The CDCs across the state, what's remarkable to me is that in spite of the fact that they work, they get something like $700,000 in funding from the state in a budget of $36 billion. Programs like this work, and yet they're not the centerpiece of economic development efforts for communities of color in our state. I think that's wrong. And I don't think there's an argument on the other side of it. You meet with those groups. So I've dedicated myself to that both on a personal level in the work I've done with them and certainly as I talk about it in this campaign. So in that sense, there are issues that are unique into many communities around our state, but in general, in Massachusetts, we have median incomes that have stayed flat for more than a decade and a cost of living that's kept going up. And one of the biggest drivers of this is healthcare costs. And what I want to remind people is that the biggest driver of that is the mergers of all the hospitals that have been happening over the last couple of decades. It makes prices go up. The state has had an obligation since the Republican administration and now the Democratic one to take action on these mergers, stopping them, creating equitable ways to make sure that care is paid for in a way that doesn't involve profiteering by hospital systems. But it doesn't act. So again, like with many of these issues, there are obvious, clear solutions that are out there. You hear a lot of broad generalities and nice-sounding platitudes on them, but not enough action. They have to be taken, and it's time for us as voters, once again, to say our vote doesn't belong to Democrats or Republicans. It belongs to us. And you got to use it to elect people that will make those sorts of changes happen.
Thank you. Any jobs program that I would create, I would want it to be blind to color, and I want it to be blind to age, and I want it to be blind to orientation, and blind to gender, so that we can all be equal under the law. Lady Justice does have a balance. She holds a balance in her hand, but she's also blindfolded so that we're treated equally under the law. The last thing that I want to have is a law or a policy that's specifically focused on tall, bald men with mustaches. I don't want to do that. If we try to create programs for specific groups, then I think it leads us down the road to say, well, this group got so much money and my group didn't get this much money, and we create an internal disharmony that shouldn't be there. You know, we're all citizens of Massachusetts. There's our commonality. And our policies for job creation, which keeps people out of the criminal justice system, should be open to all and equal to all. I think that's fair.
When I was in law school here, I spent most of my time at the Prison Legal Assistance Project. I don't know what it's called now. So I'm well aware of the differences, the racial impact of the criminal justice system. I also spent a summer when I was in law school working for Brian Stevenson, a hero in our world, in Alabama against the capital punishment, and saw the impact of a legal system that seemed focused on African American men. A number of the economic policies that would change the way, in particular, our gateway cities, the opportunities available to minorities, men, and women who don't have other opportunities, how as governors, or as a governor, some of us would change that. So I have a particular focus on gateway cities because that's where the crime is particularly high, and also on job creation in those areas. It's about workforce development. It is about education. I don't want to repeat those because I want to focus on policing, because you all know one of the reasons the laws are blind. They just seem to impact certain communities more than others. And so the obvious response to a criminal justice, those who are incarcerated, who are outnumbering, at least by, who are more African American in the criminal justice, in prisons than they are in society, isn't necessarily because African American men have more crime, do more crime. It is because we have police systems that are focused on quotas, that are focused on law and order. We give the system, it's too easy to put people into jail for nonviolent crimes. So I would commit, as I have throughout my career, mostly in terms of community policing as well as related to immigrant and minority populations, that we need training for our police forces, in particular urban police forces, the community policing that had proved very successful in a number of communities, Hispanic communities, and outreach, diversifying our police departments, including our state police, and then prosecuting police officers who are abusing the very laws that we give them to enforce. So let's start with policing, and then we can deal with the systemic problems that are leading various men and women into crime. Look, I know there's crime. Trust me, I come from the world of Homeland Security. I know there's bad, and then I know there's a system that needs to be fixed.
Thank you. We're going to go to the next question from Judge Gertner, and then we're going to pick up your questions and ask the questions to the panel.
I have a very direct question. The Supreme Court has overruled mandatory life without parole for juveniles, based on the notion that the juvenile brain is very different than the adult brain, that there's more impulsivity, it's capable of change, and that therefore life without parole violated cruel and unusual, mandatory life without parole violated the Constitution's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment, an extraordinary decision, followed by our Supreme Judicial Court, who did the same thing, only eliminating life without parole, period, describing how inappropriate it was to incarcerate juveniles who are changing, capable of change, developing for extended periods of time. In the face of that, there's the Feingold Tar Bill calling for mandatory 35-year terms for juveniles convicted of murder. Are you in favor of it? Starting with you.
The one-word answer? Are we looking for one-word
That's right, one-word answer. would be
Is that
good.
all you want?
Yeah.
I am not in favor of it.
Okay.
Ditto.
No, not in favor.
Not in favor.
I would be in favor of that because when a child takes a person's life, it's a different kind of a problem.
Okay, you go. Ask one more question.
Next question, we have some questions coming from the audience as well. The State House is here in Boston, and people, again, are all over Massachusetts. Tell me what's going to be your first trip to let the people know of Massachusetts that you're serving everybody, not just the people who are locally in Boston. Start with Ms. Kayyem and going all the way around.
Our first trip as a governor?
Yes.
In state?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, I think a city that is up and coming and that we're going to see tremendous changes because of changes to criminal justice is in Brockton. It is mostly impacted by violence. It is an area that is trying to get out of the cycle that it has found itself in. It has a new mayor who is trying to enliven the economy, and I think that mayor is an independent. So this is non-political, and it also has a strong and a high minority population. So that is the area I would focus on. I say, as a candidate, you're focused on every area because the solution for one area is not going to be the same solution for another. I mean, you think about, we're one state, many solutions. There's going to be heroin problems in Western Massachusetts. There's going to be gun violence in Boston. I mean, you can't take a one size fits all. So the first visit is just a statement, but that's all, because you got to visit a lot. You got to get out of your office and see amazing things that are happening in the state in terms of reform, and then you got to push them through Beacon Hill, because that is going to be the biggest burden on the next governor, is to change the three strikes laws, to change the mandatory minimums, and to keep pushing that we are so far behind other states. And if you got to put it in monetary terms, put it in monetary terms. It's eating our budget alive.
Mark?
Thank you.
So I grew up in Westfield, Mass, out in the western part of the state. Went to school in Worcester at WPI, where I met my wife, and we reside now in Shrewsbury, still center of Massachusetts. My first trip as governor wouldn't be outside of Boston, actually. I think it would be to a spot in Boston, and that would be the Boston Common. I think that would be very symbolic. We're a commonwealth. We're talking about common people. And I would invite people from all over the Commonwealth to meet me on Boston Common and not under the Gold Dome. I think that would be very symbolic. Thank you.
Well, the answer is I'd go to Lawrence for a couple reasons. One of them is that I think it's a community that oftentimes the Latino community feels taken for granted by the party establishments. And I want to make sure it's clear in my first trip that that's over. Second reason is that it's going to be a really good party in Lawrence, and that's absolutely the place to be. But we'll be starting to work, and I want to start there.
I'll be in Lawrence tomorrow in the luncheon singing Charlie and the MTA at the St. Patrick's Day event. That's what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. When I, as governor-elect, if I was taking a trip, it would be to each and every one of the 26 gateway communities and the neighborhoods of Boston, to let the mayors of each of those communities know that they will have a partner in the governor's office every step of the way. And that governor will not just come rhetorically and be with them, but provide them some help and some support that they haven't had for some time. Now, Deval Patrick's done a terrific job with the resources he had, but when you have to cut $10 billion out of the budget because you're dealing with the worst recession in 75 years, that causes you to make some very, very painful cuts. But we're coming back. We just announced that we had created 55,000 jobs last year, largest number since 2000. It's not enough. That's why I've suggested and set a goal of 75 to 100,000 new jobs each and every year for the next 5 years, along with 50,000 manufacturing jobs. But cities need more unrestricted local aid. Let's not forget the importance of investing in the arts. The arts are a hugely important part of the education of young people. STEM education needs to be STEAM education, science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math. I announced a couple of days ago a $10 million competitive grant program where each community would be able to apply for grant money to deal with education, training, and awareness among middle school and high school children, because young people in middle school are experimenting with alcohol and drugs at the younger and younger age, and we need to understand that. So cities and gateway communities need resources, and a governor can provide those resources, and particularly in those 4 western counties that always feel left out and left behind or feel like an afterthought, they need special treatment so that they feel fully integrated into a total Commonwealth strategy.
Mr. Lively?
Well, I would like to bring attention to Springfield. I think Springfield is really the most damaged city in the state of Massachusetts. It has suffered, I think, the most from the leftist policies of the past few administrations. And one of my church members, an African-American woman, actually she's half Indian, she calls Springfield a catfish farm. And she complains that the people that are part of our constituency are all government dependent. And there's no assistance, there's no attempt to get them off government dependency. And she says it's because the state government is using these people as a conduit of federal money into the state treasury. And that the more you can get each of these are my church members, some of them, and when they get involved in the social service agencies, the more lists, the more categories they can be categorized under, the more federal money that the state can get for each individual person. And so the state really has no incentive to lift these people out of dependency. I would introduce microfinancing in the inner cities to help inner city families break free of government dependency. I saw this in Africa. Africa has a wonderful program of dealing very small loan amounts. I've worked in Uganda and I've worked in Kenya. I support a mission in Kenya that I helped to found. And microfinancing works very, very well. And we need to really break these people away from government dependency, not build more dependency in the state.
Okay. So I'm going to start again with Mr. Lively and come from the way back. And here's the question from the audience, and try to keep your answers to 2 minutes if you can, everybody. What is your, and you already answered some of this, but what is your understanding and how would you address the school-to-prison pipeline as it applies to Massachusetts, the school-to-prison pipeline? Why?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems with the young people going into the jails is a problem with fatherhood in the homes, especially in the inner city. The kids, my church is right next door to Commerce High School, the worst high school in the city. And academically and almost every other way. We have to shoo them out from behind the building every morning because they go back there to smoke pot before they go into the class. And these kids the common denominator with these kids is fatherlessness. And the people that complain the worst about it are the moms. They're the moms. And we need to do better about that. And I think that we should be focusing on trying to rebuild, especially inner city families, and bring them back together again. And that's, I think, the number one thing. One thing, going to a previous question I'd like to bring out, when we're talking about, you point out this is an all-white panel. I don't know, I may be the only candidate here. My running mate is African-American woman. We haven't officially announced her. Just this week she came on the ticket. Her name is Shelley Saunders. She's an inner-city social justice advocate and a mother of 6 and a grandmother of 6. and we're going to be campaigning together. And she has a special understanding of what's going on in the inner cities. That's what my focus is. I would want to bring attention to Springfield.
So in terms of the school to prison pipeline, I had talked a little bit earlier about what Molly Baldwin and Roca is doing with respect to perhaps the most vulnerable population of young people we have, 17 to 24. I would really rephrase it into the not in school to prison pipeline, because too many of our young people are getting involved at a younger and younger age with drugs and substance abuse and gangs and violence and the system of incarceration, and we need to intervene at a younger and younger age. That's why we need to focus on education, awareness, training at a younger and younger age. That's why I mentioned the $10 million competitive grant program. And if we need more money, we'll make more money available, because we need to do a far better job at educating, using psychologists in schools, working with mental health professionals in schools, so that we recognize the issues and challenges that young people face. We just went through, in my own home city of Newton, 3 teenage suicides in the last 6 months in the city of Newton. When a young person says, maybe the world would be a better place without me, we need people who are trained to recognize those telltale signs of instability in those young people, and then deal with the mental health and behavioral health challenges they face, so that they don't go from school, out of school, into incarceration, so that they actually are treated and given the services they need, so that they actually wind up completing school, going to high school, perhaps going to a community college or a four-year school, and become the backbone of the workforce that we need so desperately to build the society into everything we want it to be.
You know, this problem of young people going into prison is one that it disproportionately affects communities of color in Massachusetts, and a lot of it has to do with a lot of the issues we've been talking about. That's why I raised it at the beginning in my remarks about what young people are dealing with who don't have the color skin that I do. They have an early encounter with law enforcement, and they may start them off on a different path. And there's a lot of complicated social and economic and educational issues that aren't being dealt with. You know, Steve's right to raise the point about mental health counseling, vocational counseling, family counseling available from school systems, from community organizations. But we've known this forever, and the state's not adequately funding it, and it's not okay. It's not okay. There isn't a rationale for it. There shouldn't be a higher priority than making sure that every child in Massachusetts gets a good education and sees opportunity for themselves. It shouldn't be optional, but it is in Massachusetts today. So you have to interrupt that early on, and by taking that holistic public health kind of perspective to this problem and not viewing it as a question of, hey, some kids are just bad. They're not. They're not. They're living in situations that they end up acting out from, or maybe don't see other opportunities. There are people doing good work. Up in Lowell, UTech does great work reaching out to kids to help keep them away from, or even if they're in gangs, pulling themselves back into more productive activities in their lives. It's hard. It doesn't work most of the time. They also struggle to get money from the state. I can't explain why. I can't explain why. This is the most progressive state in the country with a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature, and there are organizations like that struggling for money. It has to change, and it will only change when we demand it.
A few years ago, I was looking for 6 machinists to work at my company, and I went to Worcester Trade School to find some, and the head of the department was overjoyed that I was coming there looking for co-op students. The problem was he had no freshmen in the program, he had no sophomores in the program, he had 1 junior and no seniors in the machining program at a trade school in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I was looking for 6 at one company. I think we have an over-focus on kids in high school now, telling them that success only comes through a college education and all the debt that goes along with it. I would like to have more kids exposed to other options. Let's bring back metal shop. Let's bring it back wood shop. Let's bring back all these different things so they can be exposed to them and find out that they can have a wonderful living. When I worked at Old Colony as a union member, I met a lot of great people there. They were raising their families and paying their bills. They could afford a rent or a mortgage. They were saving for the future on a blue-collar work ethic. It worked for my mom. It worked for my dad. It was working for them. It can work for many other kids, but we're telling them that doesn't exist anymore. But it does. There are good-paying jobs for carpenters and welders and electricians and plumbers and machinists. They're out there. I'm trying to find them, actually. So in the Fisher administration, we would focus on trade schools and educating kids so when they come out of schools, they have a trade they can apply in a job. Jobs, not jails.
I want to be optimistic for a minute. And we really can do this. I mean, this is the beauty of this issue for our time, because we know what will work. We have clear studies from other states that will guide us and that can guide us with the right leadership. I have 3 children, and I believe that we have to act big so they can dream big. And this is the issue, that we will get more children out of a pipeline that is drawing them from schools to prisons. How do we do that? One is just clear, a commitment to universal pre-K. That gap, I have kids in public school, that gap that they enter in public school between those who have had a pre-K opportunity and those who've not, a gap that is evidenced in verbal skills, in reading skills, is one that does not close, but for the best efforts of our public school teachers. So if we can get kids into programs that actually close the opportunity and educational gap, they are more likely to stay in school, and therefore they are more likely, right, to not be in the criminal justice system. Those numbers are clear. It's not rocket science, right? And then you focus on workforce development. Second, women who are in jail are likely to have children, obviously, that fall within the child welfare system, and then are more likely to enter the criminal justice system. We need to find alternatives for parents so that their children have opportunities, especially parents of nonviolent who commit nonviolent crimes, so that their children are not just regurgitated back into the same system. So this is a particular issue for female inmates. Third, I want people to have, no, it's true, I mean, it's the numbers are there, and I think that's right to focus on female inmates because of the responsibility they often have for children. Third, I want all of us to have confidence in the system. I talked about police officers before. I've worked with police all my life. I want to support them and support public safety by going after bad apples strong. You actually defend the core value of our police officers. I also think that's true of our crime lab. We have men in jail and men being released who are not violent or not guilty, and men being released from jail who are guilty because of a system that was so focused on incarcerating as many people as possible. No one woke up and said, isn't it weird that there's one crime lab specialist who has 100% hit rate, and then she gets 7 or 8 years. So I am committed that I get out the bad apples out of the system that is so focused on law and order, because there's so many good apples. There's so many good police officers, so many good crime lab specialists, so many good DAs. And that's what I would do across the board.
I'm reading this question that was submitted by a group in the audience. We are Lambda, the HLS LGBT student organization. One of the candidates here, Scott Lively, played an instrumental role in the passage of Uganda's 2014 anti-homosexuality legislation, which provides for life imprisonment of anyone engaged in any same-sex sexual activity. He's also expressed support for Russia's recent anti-LGBT legislation. Lambda students strongly condemn such legislation as homophobic, racist, and sexist. We believe that it's a moral stain that a person with such views could be running to be governor. You're all candidates seeking to be governor. We want each of you to explain whether you support the imposition of morality legislation of this kind here in Massachusetts, in the U.S. as a whole, and why.
I don't want to give Mr. Lively any more time than he has had. You know my answer.
I addressed this somewhat at a forum at the Suffolk Law School, and I want to have it play out here as well. President Kennedy told us that our rights don't come from the state, because if they did, the state that gives them can take them away. And so I use that to play out an example here. Let's take the example of a gay couple that's married in Massachusetts. They travel across the country. There are 38 states that have constitutional amendments that say that marriage is between a man and a woman. So what happens? In Massachusetts, they're married, and then they're not, and then they're married, and they're not. Then what's happened if they travel overseas, let's say to Uganda? They're imprisoned. Or if they travel to a Muslim country, they could lose their head. This is what happens when our rights come from the state. If we were to say, let's have a ballot initiative. By the way, I belong to the Coalition for Marriage and Family, and I also belong to the Catholic Church, two organizations that want a ballot initiative that people can vote on whether marriage is between a man and a woman. I'm against it. Why? Because one year it could be one thing, and the next year it can be something else. We can't have this go back and forth. We can't travel across the country or international borders and have it mean one thing one place and one thing another. So what's the solution? We have it play out in the culture. For example, concrete example, Duck Dynasty, Phil Robinson, okay? He made his comments, he was suspended. With no government interference, with no law passed, with no executive order, it played out in the culture. There was a prominent lesbian, I don't remember her name, but obviously she stood on the other side of the issue as Phil Robinson, but she said, this is Nazism. This is Nazism. And so as part of one of her comments and how it played out in the culture, he was reinstated back. It has to play out in the culture. We can't look to the government to be imposing one thing one year and one thing the other. It's my solution.
Well, Juliette's right, first of all. Let me just say something else. As a Jewish person, you don't know what you're talking about in terms of Nazis. Nazis are Nazis. Nazis are Nazis. So let's not mix things up here. People have fought for too long and sacrificed too much for anyone to be able to question whether or not we're all equal or not. We are all equal. For whatever, I don't know what the reasons are that people might think that we're not, but they got to get over it. They got to get over it. It's enough already. We're here at a forum to talk about criminal justice. There are real issues. There's people sitting in jail, and there's people that want to talk about this. Everyone is equal. Everybody's rights have to be protected, and we have a right to expect that our government does its job well. Enough with the rest of it. We're all equal. Get over it.
I said earlier that I thought that protecting public safety was the governor's #1 responsibility, because without that, the rest can't happen. But I think I'd like to amend that. I think protecting the civil rights and civil liberties of every one of our citizens is the #1 responsibility of leadership. And that means respecting the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. And that means that whether we find these comments reprehensible or not, and many of us do, that we need to speak out and say we find them reprehensible, but we need to respect the right of an individual to make those statements. Look, the American Nazi Party was marching in Skokie 4 decades ago past the homes of people who had been victims of the Holocaust, and that was a very, very challenging situation. But those of us who believe in civil rights and civil liberties said they have the right to do that, even though we find it reprehensible. So let's speak out against reprehensible rhetoric. Let's speak out against rhetoric that demeans and denigrates and treats people with disrespect. There may be 38 states, but let's hope by the end of the first term of one of us that there will be no states in the United States that don't recognize the validity of marriage equality. That's the goal we should seek, and that's the goal many of us seek. But let's protect the rights of any individual to speak out and use language, however reprehensible, that protects that First Amendment, because that is a sacred right that very few countries on the face of the planet have. We have it, and we should protect it at all costs.
Well, I feel very honored. The only candidate to have a question that everyone else gets to focus on me. That's great. Well, first of all, I want to correct the record. I do support the Russian law. I don't support the Ugandan law. And so, yes, I do hold a biblical worldview that homosexuality is wrong. And I also believe, thank you very much, I also believe that we all are equal in the sight of God. Every human being is created in the image of God. But not all conduct is equal. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having a debate about people being in prison. The conduct of the people that are in prison is different than the people that are outside of the prison. And so we can distinguish between who people are and what people do. As a matter of fact, this whole question comes right down to the way that I would deal with the problem of bullying in the schools versus the way that these people with their backs to me would do it. When they approach the problem of bullying in the schools, their solution is to go in and make all the children change their minds, no matter what their family values might be, no matter what their parents are teaching them, so that they all become pro-gay. That's the answer to the bullying problem. My solution to the well, you just go and look at the way the bullying programs work if you don't believe me. My solution is to teach the children to respect each other despite their differences, right? That's the way we used to do it. Why can't we do that again? I don't want anyone who is living in a homosexual lifestyle to have their door kicked in. I don't support the Uganda law, but I do believe that our mainstream culture was better when we had a family-oriented system, when marriage was considered a sacred entity, and that sex belonged inside of that and not outside of it. Now, we still had subcultures where people lived outside the mainstream, and we were tolerant of that, and things went pretty well. But in the late 1960s, this movement got very radical and decided to try to transform the mainstream culture into their own image. And frankly, I'm not willing to let that happen without an argument. That's my whole case. Do what you want to in the privacy of your bedroom, but don't go into the schools and teach it to the kids.
This is a question that when someone in the audience is at, oh, I'm sorry, no, you go next.
There are serious inequities for women involved in the criminal justice system, pretrial treatment, lack of substance abuse treatment, etc. What would your proposal be to address the issues of treatment for women who are now in the criminal justice system? Start here and go all the way around.
Okay, so I've already addressed this a little bit, which is the needs of women are different, both why they enter the criminal justice system and then what is happening to them in the criminal justice system. So let's just look at the resources for female inmates and populations are vastly different than the resources, I put that in quotes, for male. We need to focus on workforce opportunities, educational access, care for their children, and a lot of times that will mean them being out of the criminal justice system, right? They are out of incarceration because just the nature of the way this works sometimes, if the woman is behind bars, the child is either abandoned or taken care of in ways that are not going to keep that child safe and protected. Secondly, the issues that are facing women and why they enter jail are systemic and across the board. Some of them are economic. We still live in a state where women make 70 cents, 60 cents, 50 cents. It's about access to opportunities compared to men. It's about access to opportunities, access to an economy that is growing, and a focus on women in the workforce, which is what I've done with the plan that I just posted yesterday, sort of focusing specifically on access for women to grab the economic opportunities that are available for them. So, and then third is the women's prisons that I don't want to speak for the other candidates, but I mean, I know these prisons. I used to be I used to be an undersecretary at the Executive Office of Public Safety, which oversees Department of Corrections. I also was in PLAP. The women's facilities, while I, like Steve and others, are committed to not enhancing or spending more on prison construction. The women's prison facilities are as horrible as a man's, but worse so. I mean, they have not, the overpopulation, the privacies that women sometimes need, the issues related to the correction officer to women ratio impact women in a different way. So I would be committed to looking at those prisons, not only reducing the prison population, but obviously focused on correction systems within the women's prisons in this state.
Let me do this, one question, follow-up for any of you. There's a bill that would prohibit shackling of pregnant women prisoners. Are you in favor?
Absolutely.
It's like there's a lightning
These
rod.
are, I know. It's like some of these are real easy. Yes, I will gladly. It is bad morals, bad policy, doesn't work. And look, there's a child. I mean, I don't want to forget the mother. I'm a mother. We have to look at the system that we're creating for the children that are being born under this system. We can do this. This is what makes me optimistic and an optimistic candidate for governor. We can do this, but we need to focus on a system that is sort of literally breeding itself and just self-justifying itself, and that seems to, and we can look at other states and learn from that. So absolutely.
So for all you ladies out there, isn't labor tough enough without being in shackles? I mean, this is one of these no-brainer questions, right? With regard to women in the prison system, like I said earlier, I think that justice should be blind. And with regard to jobs, job creation, let's look what President Kennedy said again. A rising economy or a rising tide, right, floats all boats. Whether it's the yacht or the dinghy or the motorboat or the rowboat, a rising tide, a rising economy applies to everyone, regardless of gender or age. So let's create the jobs, let's make Massachusetts business friendly again, and women will benefit from that as well. Women will benefit from that as well. Thank you.
I have a question, because this law about shackling, when I first heard about it, you say, wait a minute, that wasn't already illegal? We're in Massachusetts, once again, the most progressive state in the country, with a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature, and we need to figure out a way to pass a law to prevent shackling of women in labor. So what's going on? What's going on? We get very complacent in our state with our civil rights and our civil liberties. Our Attorney General is seeking authority to expand warrantless surveillance of communications, which has been happening under a Democratic president. We have to pay attention to our civil liberties in this country. We have to be vigilant about them. And when people are doing things, even if they're doing other things that are good, and we have leaders that I'm talking about that have done good things otherwise, they don't get a free pass on infringing on our civil rights because we like them otherwise. As voters, we have to pay attention.
So I want to go back to the question about women in the criminal justice system, which I think was the original question, because bail reform is a significant ingredient in my criminal justice approach. In 2012, pretrial detentions of women from Framingham MCI affected more than 5,000 children. Juliette talked about this in her remarks, and I think they're linked up together. So if that many children are affected, and we can use pretrial risk assessment evaluations and give judges that kind of tool around bail reform, I think we can have a significant impact on nonviolent and low-level drug offenders who, by virtue of being held in prison or in county jails and being taken away from their children, exacerbate already significant problems. So bail reform has got to be something we look at. I do trust judges using those pretrial risk assessment tools to do the right thing, to protect society from those who need to be protected, who we need to be protected from, but to give so many women an opportunity to go back to their children, deal with their issues, whether they're mental health, behavioral health, substance abuse, or the criminal justice issues for which they have been incarcerated. And by doing that, I think we can create a far stronger sense of what it means to rebuild that family unit, even during the crisis that is attendant to most of these families.
No, I don't support the shackling of women in labor. That's
Oh, I didn't either.
barbaric.
I'm sorry.
It's a given with you, Steve.
And that's barbaric. I would agree. And it's interesting that she took the position on the far left and I took the position on the far right. But I would actually agree to a large extent with what you said. And I've seen this in Springfield. You know, when a woman comes out of jail in Springfield, it's much harder to find her a place to stay than it is for a man. There are very few beds in sober living homes, for example, and other types of facilities. So, but that's a Band-Aid on the problem. It's dealing with the symptom and not the source of the problem. And once again, I go back to the breakdown of the family. That happy women who are in healthy families aren't committing crimes and going to jail. Once again, this is another side effect, and consequence of the breakdown of the natural family. And women are suffering from it. You know, in the Bible, you know, this is the book that actually the people who founded this church went by. I mean, this was more like a church than a university at the beginning. Harvard University was founded by people who believe this, and that in the Bible, the groups of people that are focused on most in terms of concern are widows and orphans. And when you're looking at the problems in Massachusetts today, those are the categories of people that most need the help. Children who are growing up without benefit of fathers in the home, that go right from school into jails, and women who didn't make a bond with a man and stay together and raise a family, that end up in drug and alcohol problems and destitute on the streets. You know, I work with them. Right? This is theoretical for a lot of you people, but I work with them every single day. I know what's going on.
We're going to go to closing statements, but before that, I just wanted to describe what is left on the table that we didn't get to. So there was going to be a lightning round for, do you believe in the legalization of marijuana? We were going to talk about school discipline issues, which were part of the school to prison pipeline. Something like, I believe, 80% of the young men that I sentenced on crack cocaine charges had been kicked out of kicked out of school in the 10th grade or the 11th grade. We wanted to talk about voting rights for incarcerated prisoners. We wanted to talk about what has happened to the Massachusetts Parole Board and the appalling decrease in the rate of individuals who've been paroled. We had wanted to talk about the fact that Massachusetts public defenders, adjusting for inflation, earn less than any public defenders in the nation. But these are the questions that we couldn't answer, so we couldn't ask, so we're ready now for your closing statements. Juliette?
Okay. I want to thank everyone again, including those who expressed their First Amendment rights in the audience, for a lively debate and discussion about criminal justice reform. So once again, let's begin with the good news. This is good policy. It is good for our society, and it's cheaper to push criminal justice reform. And that is so rare. And so we will embrace it. And under my administration, as I have said from the beginning, I have been committed to this. As a young student in prison legal assistance, I worked with Professor Ogletree in South Africa as it was trying to bring up an indigent defense system after apartheid, and then in anti-death penalty reform. This is something that is part of who I am as a progressive Democrat. So let's just quickly go through the 4 issues that I am committed to. Sentencing reform and pushing this legislature to change the laws that confined judges like you. Second, view corrections as corrections. Right? Get it? It is about workforce development. It's about educational opportunities, because if you can reduce recidivism, you are halfway there. You really are. Third, look at communities and specific issues that fall outside, that you can get outside of the criminal justice system. Bail reform, absolutely important. Veterans, getting them into veterans courts, and expanding drug courts. Those 3 issues, if you can get fewer people into into the prison system, you've solved not only the prison overpopulation problems and all the issues related to our prison systems, but then you reduce the likelihood of recidivism. And finally, I am committed to all of you as someone who respects and has worked with public safety all my life, good public safety. Bad cops, bad prosecutors, bad crime labs, they will not be tolerated, because the second people like you and people like me don't have faith in the system has failed us all. So thank you very much.
Once again, the Coalition for Jobs Not Jails has invited all of us and all the other candidates who couldn't appear here today to the Boston Common next month to talk about how we create jobs here in Massachusetts so that people don't go to jail, and so that when people come out of jail, they don't go back to jail. I've outlined my 4-point program earlier today, and why does that work here in Massachusetts? I'm a Republican, and Massachusetts is owned by the Democrats. It's owned by the Democrats. Juliette talked about failed programs. They're not failed Republican programs. They're failed Democrat programs. We've run this experiment before. We've run it in New Jersey. New Jersey's a blue state. It's a Democrat state. And Democrats have elected and re-elected Republican Chris Christie. Why? Because they like what he's done. This is a fact. The blue state of Wisconsin has elected Governor Scott Walker, and they've re-elected him by a wider margin in a recall vote. Why? Because the failed Democrat policies that were causing millions and millions and millions of dollars in debt, in 3 short years, it's been turned around, and he's now created a $1 billion surplus. And he's trying to find out ways not to create more government programs, but how to give it back to the taxpayers. We've run the experiment. We've seen the results. Let's implement them here in Massachusetts. Jobs, not jails. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm very appreciative of the time to speak with you tonight. As I said, I'm Evan Falchuk. I'm the United Independent Party candidate for governor. I've been calling for smart, brave reform of our politics, economy, and government. And the job of the next governor is going to be to capture the imagination of voters around the idea that we can reform our criminal justice system and to change the mindset, the frame of mind we have around these issues, to be not just about crime and punishment, but instead about how do we deal with the complex underlying root causes of so many of these issues. We know what the answers are. They've been studied, they've been published, there's been some great things been written about how to reform and reinvent our justice system, but they're not being put into place. So the question that I ask voters is to think about, do you have confidence that in another Democratic or Republican administration that they will finally decide to start doing these? Do you? Because I don't. It's the reason I'm running for governor, is to bring about smart, brave reform, and I humbly ask for your support. Thank you.
Evan asked a question. I'm going to try to answer it in very personal terms. Being governor is being the chief executive of the state. Being governor is about leadership. Being governor is about being bold and innovative and imaginative, but being governor is about having demonstrated in the life that you led prior to running for governor and prior to being governor, can you keep the commitments that you make so that people have confidence in your leadership and confidence in what is going to happen on your watch? You elected me state treasurer back in 2010. I made some commitments to you. They don't have a lot to do with criminal justice, but they have to do with putting the state's checkbook online, saving tens of millions of dollars, in the case of the public pension system, $100 million a year, so that when we talk about saving money and repurposing it for other things, I've done it. I have a track record. I promised to create jobs. We created jobs through the Small Business Banking Partnership with over $1 billion of small business lending. So again and again and again, during these last 3+ years, you gave me your votes, many of you. I hope I've honored your votes and kept my commitments. So ultimately, it's about solutions. Who is the person who is going to make commitments, as I've made many commitments here tonight around criminal justice? I won't repeat those in the interest of time. And who is going to keep those commitments? Who is going to implement those policies and be bold and innovative? And who has a track record of working with the legislature over the past almost 4 years to make things happen and to get laws passed that have enriched, enlarged, and enlivened the lives of the people of the Commonwealth? So I look forward to this campaign. I look forward to future discussions on this and many other topics. And thank you all so much for being here and participating this evening.
Well, I may be the most conservative candidate running for any gubernatorial spot in the whole United States. And I'm running in the bluest of the blue states. So I obviously, and I'm going to break the first rule of campaigning with this, I obviously don't expect to become the governor of Massachusetts. Right? I don't think that's going to happen unless it's a miracle from God. I do believe in miracles. I don't know that I'd really want the job. But I'm in this because I want to articulate a biblical worldview that hasn't been articulated in the political arena in Massachusetts for a long time. And frankly, being as far to the right that I am, I think a lot of observers recognize that the left and the right actually overlap. And I think where we overlap is my focus. And I want to point out to you, and I think this is something everybody in this room would agree with that hasn't been brought up tonight, is the expansion of the police state that we are all under. Every single one of us is being scrutinized by our government. Our emails, our phone calls, there are cameras going up on every street corner. We are being scrutinized like never before. Our police are being militarized. They're getting leftover military equipment from the military to the police departments. The cops look like SWAT teams. The SWAT teams look like military forces and not beat cops anymore. This is concerning to all of us. But the question is, why is this happening? It's happening because whenever a population of people loses the ability to restrain themselves, a police state rises up to try to control them. And if you really want to solve the problem, let's get back to teaching personal responsibility, basic morality that existed at the time when everything really worked, right? You look back, if you look back, excluding the issue of race, which is a black mark on our society from the 40s and 50s, but excluding that, in the 1940s and 50s, we had a much better, a woman didn't have to leave the home to work. The family could live on one income. You could let the kids go out and play in the streets without worrying about them being raped. We now have a very, very different society. And really, what it all boils down to, my final comments, what it all boils down to is a difference in value system. It's a matter of worldview. Let's get back to the worldview that worked, that our grandparents and our great-grandparents thrived with. And let's get away from the worldview that is disintegrating our society around us while the police state rises up to take control of our lives.
Let me thank all of you, panelists, community, audience, for coming. This has been a lively discussion about criminal reform in Massachusetts, and I hope that the next governor will watch this tape over and over again, and that we will be able to do some of the things we promised. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you guys again soon.
Oh, it's fun to see you.